Welcome back to another episode of Cameras and Caffeine, the show where I help you take your creative passion and turn it into an innovative side hustle. What do skyscraper climbing, photography, and real estate have in common? Well, all of them culminate in the person that sits right in front of me right now,
Whoa.
Zach Stevenson.
What's going on, everybody?
Zach is a realtor and skyscraper urban explorer photographer in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we actually are right now. You may notice the studio is a little bit different, and that's because it's not my studio. It is, in fact, the studio in Zach's real estate office.
Heck yeah.
So today we are drinking Keurig coffee with cinnamon toast crunch creamer. It's a very unique blend. Let's just say that. Not sponsored, but if you need to buy a house in North Carolina, go to my buddy Zach. He'll get you taken care of.
100%.
These guys are solid. They're great. They're all very nice.
Heck yeah.
So, Zach, what you do is very unique. It's something that not a lot of people have the courage and just kind of comfort, ability to get out of their comfort zone to do.
Right.
So I really want to kind of get into just what you do. So for those who have never seen your content, if you had to kind of sum up what you do and what the craziest things you do with skyscraper climbing photography are, what would you say?
If you had to sum it up, we pretty much go to big cities, we find skyscrapers, we find some kind of way to get on top of said skyscrapers, and we shoot crazy cool video, photos, we work with brands, do all kinds of stuff like that. I'm also going to be super congested throughout this whole thing, so I apologize.
We both are.
We both are completely. Allergies, mess.
Oh, it's bad. And I got over the flu about 2 weeks ago, too. And so that's actually why I had a huge gap in the release between episode 1 and episode 2 of this show.
Yeah.
I released episode 1 March 1st. Episode 2 was March 24th. Oh, wow. It took me forever. I lost my voice a week before I had the flu. And so, I flew over to Charlotte yesterday, and the pollen has just been, oh, my gosh.
Killer.
But, kind of going into what you're talking about with all that, though, what got you into photography and your creative passion that you pursue now?
As far as photography, generalized, I'd say in 2017, I went to New York City for the first time. It was my first time flying. I took a flight up there, and I ended up getting my hands on a camera, and I just started playing around with the camera in New York City. It was winter. It was snowing. It was beautiful. And I fell in love with that camera, and I'm like, wow, taking pictures is super sick. I can, whatever I'm doing, whatever moments and memories I'm making, I can capture. And I feel like that's kind of every photographer's story in a sense. But so I took that. A month later, I got my first camera, started shooting, and it just exploded from there. Really.
That's crazy. And the type of photography you got into, it's very unconventional because a lot of, in the sense that not a lot of people say, hey, how am I going to, because you talked about this with me yesterday.
Sure.
Charlotte's a very saturated market for photo and video.
Yep.
And so you really have to do something to set yourself apart.
Exactly. And I realized that when I came to Charlotte, because growing up around Charlotte, I never really came into the city with my family or any of that into special occasions or whatever. But when I finally, got old enough, got a car, got some free time, whatever, I would come into the city and do some photography. And I'm like, okay, if I want to make a business out of this, if I want to make money out of this, I need to do something different because everyone and their brother, everyone and their mother is a photographer. And I had to set myself apart. So I started reaching out to other creators, and I found this dude who was doing a little bit of rooftopping. He was from Vermont, and he was climbing some stuff. And I'm like, whoa, this is freaking insane. If I could get into this niche, I would completely set myself apart from everybody. So we set a date to hang out. We brought a couple other friends, and we went on top of this hotel, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was in business casual. I'm wearing a freaking button up, jeans. I had my camera. And to get in this particular building, we had to go into the parking garage, go up the stairs of the parking garage, and then there was this gap in, how when stairs go up, there's a gap in the middle? Well, this gap was only about a foot wide, okay? And we had to climb up the wall, right? And there was this air conditioner vent that we had to stand on, or this light fixture. We had to climb up this air conditioner vent, stand on this light fixture, okay? And then reach up to this gap, this foot wide gap in the staircase, and climb up. And I had zero upper body strength. So my friend, who is a parkour beast, just Spider-Man up the wall in 2 seconds. And we're all dumbstruck. But then he finds this like small hand towel in the staircase, and he holds it down. Okay. And he's holding it down to us. So we like somehow climb towards this light fixture, and we reach up and we grab this hand towel, and he pulls us up, and we're like gripping onto the hand towel. Then we're on top of the light fixture. Now we have to go another 6 feet up to get towards the staircase gap, this foot wide gap. And of course I can't make it because I have 0 upper body strength. I'm standing on top of the light fixture. For context, there's probably a 10, 15 foot drop, 20 foot drop, something like that. It's huge. It is a very tall staircase.
The towel is like standing between you and not really, I wouldn't say certain death, more like certain injury, maybe possible.
Lots of broken bones, 100%. Yeah. Lots and lots of broken bones.
A not so fun trip to the local hospital.
Exactly. But so now I have, and I have a video of this that I could show you later, but I'm sweating buckets, and I have two friends holding onto my arms. Okay. And, at this point they're pulling me up to this gap, and my legs are just dangling at this point. I'm off the light fixture, so I am literally dangling, and I have one friend on each arm pulling me up through this gap, and I'm grabbing onto like these metal bars, and I'm trying to hoist myself up. I'm like losing strength in my arms. I'm so sweaty. I'm like, their hands are slipping, their grips are slipping. But finally, they were able to pull me up. I helped, as much as I could, and we got in the staircase, got on the roof. I'm like, adrenaline's going crazy already, because I'm like, I literally said, you can hear me laughing. I was somehow so calm. I'm like, my life is in your hands right now, guys. You can just like pull me up. It'd be great. But we got up there, and you can see the first ever picture of me rooftopping on my Instagram is literally just me, business casual. Like, I'm like grasping the edge of the roof and like peeking over with my camera, scared to death. But and that was the first step. And after that, I really fell in love with it. I really fell in love with the freedom that it gave you. Like, the feeling of freedom and being on top of the world is just incredible. And I just kept doing it ever since. And I just kept pushing those boundaries, pushing those fears, to be able to conquer that fear of heights and all the other fear that comes with it.
And those who are kind of curious about the risks and everything related to all this too, I do want to provide a bit of a disclaimer. Zach is profoundly respectful, careful, and he's very mindful of legal situations with all of this too. So I'm not encouraging, or none of us are encouraging you all to go climb the Empire State Building. Please
do not do that.
It's so interesting though, because it's a niche that like you've got into, like not a lot of people do.
Yeah.
We talk a lot on this podcast about ways to turn passions into income generating side hustles. I mean, that's literally pretty much the slogan that I open every episode with.
Right.
So kind of like relating to that, we talked a bit about this yesterday after I flew in.
Yep.
How did you start generating income from this? And how would you recommend, what's the path for turning something like this into a side hustle?
So it can get a little tricky due to the nature of what it is. So it's not like you can just start blasting it out there and being like, hey, do you want to climb a skyscraper? Pay me and I will take you up there, because that gets very tricky very fast as far as like liability and safety and all this other stuff. So we don't really do that. What we can do, and what I have done to turn this into something that I can create income, is work with products and brands and clothing and stuff, because that doesn't require anybody else to be there other than the people in my circle that I trust. So pretty much the gist of it is I reach out to these brands, to these big brands, athletic companies, shoes, watches, t-shirts, hoodies, whatever the case may be. We've done pocket watches, like literally everything. And we're pretty much just like, hey, we can provide professional grade photos and videos, unlike something that you've never seen before. And I want you to take a look at my feed and like pretty much just let me know what you think. And they're always like, whoa, this is insane. And we pretty much just provide something that nobody else can give them, pretty much, because everybody can just go out and take some clothes, go out into the streets of Charlotte or Los Angeles or whatever and take some sick street photos. Everybody can do that. And nobody can just get on top of the world and showcase somebody's brand, because every brand wants to set themselves up apart from other brands. Just like we want, as creatives, want to set ourselves apart from other creators. Brands have the same exact mindset, because there are a million up and coming clothing brands. There are a million up and coming watch brands. So they see that opportunity to do something that nobody else is doing, and they want to capitalize on that. So we just do photo packages, and we're like, just send us whatever you want marketing material of, and we will go out and get some sick content. And usually they'll give us creative freedom with it. And they're like, that's like, you guys are doing some sick stuff. We trust it. Just get us some awesome content. We're like, heck yeah. So that's kind of how we've turned it into a little bit of an income producing side hustle, as you could say.
And your situation is so interesting too, with like how you've succeeded so well with it.
Right.
Because you're in real estate, but that's a fairly recent development.
Yep.
No pun intended there. With all of that though, like, would you classify yourself as even if you're kind of shifting out of it now, but would you have classified yourself as a full-time creative?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. This was like my main source of income. This is what I was doing all the time. Like, if anybody were to ask, like, professionally, like what I did, I would say like, oh, I own a small multimedia marketing company. We specialize in niche photography and videography. And that would kind of be my answer of what I do for a living.
That's a great way to market yourself. And like, it's just crazy, the substance of what you've built with it.
Right.
And it's just, we talk a lot about value on a lot of the episodes of this podcast, because value is critical to what you provide, in terms of a service and product, especially when you're a service-based freelancer or contractor. And, the value you provide and the fact that the way you set yourself apart within this space is remarkable, and it's shown itself to be very successful. Mm-hmm. And that's just what I find so interesting about it. Because, if you literally, you could walk up to somebody, and if they're curious about, like, oh, what you have a camera, like, you explain this to them, they're going to be like, dude, your life's a movie. And honestly, like, I've had a couple, we have some mutual friends, and like, I told you yesterday, one of them was like, man, he is like a movie.
Yeah, I remember when I first got started here doing real estate, we all sat around this table and everybody's like, tell us something, interesting about yourself. When I first started, we have a weekly meeting here, and I'm like, I climb skyscrapers for fun in my spare time. Everybody's like, what? They're like, are you Spider-Man? And I'm like, I'm not that cool, but I try.
I mean, you look like Tobey Maguire.
I've never heard that before. Man,
that's really cool. And, kind of talking about the movie aspect of it, like, for example, Zach is on TikTok, and Zach's gotten a lot more value out of TikTok than most people have. You met your girlfriend on TikTok, and
did.
She lives in California?
California, yeah.
I mean, that's just like, you're like the king of long distance with that. Like, that's crazy.
So,
how'd that happen?
That was like 2020, going kind of like mid 2020. I just, COVID's going on. I had just gotten back from Europe. I spent a couple weeks in Europe, climbing like old cathedrals and doing all kinds of crazy cool stuff. And I was just scrolling through TikTok one day, and then she just shows up on my feed, and I'm like, oh, like, comment, follow, doo-doo. She likes, comments, follows back. And then friendship started, blah, 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 the whole 9 yards. And I had been wanting to go somewhere. I was getting travel fever, as we all do. I'm like, okay, I need to go somewhere. It's been a couple months since I got back from Europe, and I got to go somewhere. And I was planning on going to like Massachusetts or something like that. And then that trip ended up getting canceled. So I'm like, okay, I still have this travel fever. I still have this money set aside. And we had been building quite the friendship. And I'm like, how about I come out to Los Angeles and we hang out? And she's like, that sounds like a sick idea. Her mom ended up like not being okay with that idea because I'm just an internet stranger, right? She's like, the biggest thing was like, what if he's a human trafficker? Like, and that's completely valid to like these days. Absolutely. So we like wrote her an essay. She like Allie, she wrote, her name's Allie. She wrote her mom an essay of why it's beneficial and like why he's not a human trafficker. And then I went out with a friend of mine, a couple friends of mine, and made a video, like a 5-minute long video of why I'm not a human trafficker. I went out, we met my parents. It was like a vlog pretty much. We met my parents. We went to this local community theater that I had worked at. We did like, showed my town. We did like all this like expose of me, right? And she showed her parents, and they're like, okay, this guy's pretty cool. He went and like, he didn't take no for an answer, and he went and did all this stuff because he wants to hang out pretty much. So all that went forward. I got up with a buddy of mine who I posted on Instagram because I had like another ticket or something, and I wanted somebody to come with. So I just posted on my Instagram, like, who's down to come to Los Angeles and just chill with me. And the only person that was actually like ready to just send me the money was somebody I had never met before. No idea who this dude was. His name was Jeremy. And he's like, well, maybe we should like hang out first before I just fly with a complete stranger and like stay with them. And I'm like, dude, that's totally a great idea. I kind of want to meet you too. I'm like, what are you doing this weekend? I'm like, I'm free. And I'm like, you want to climb a construction crane? And he's like, a what? And I'm like, a construction crane. You want to climb a construction? I mean, he's like, okay. So we go out, have a sick freaking adventure, hanging off these freaking cranes, taking some sick photos. Like a couple days later, fly to Los Angeles, stay in an Airbnb in Long Beach, California, meet up with Allie, hang out, go to the beach. It's freaking great. Stay the whole weekend, fly back. And then she came out to North Carolina a couple months later, and then we just started going back and forth. Flying back and forth, and it's sick.
That's awesome. And I mean, you've got so much of an interesting story to tell to people with all of that.
Yeah.
And that's why I like sharing your background with it first, kind of before we get into all this other stuff, because
right.
It's like, wow. It's cool too, because like I've known you since 2016, roughly.
Yeah.
I've been friends with you for like 6 years.
Yes.
And like we've always talked about hanging out, popping up to Charlotte and doing something. And I live in the Shoals, Alabama currently. It's the top left corner of the state. I'm 3 hours from Memphis. And I am about an hour and a half from Corinth, roughly. I'm thinking it's Corinth. Yeah. And Mississippi. And, 2 hours from Nashville. And so I'm kind of in the middle of all that. And a new airline actually came to town like a month, not even a month ago now, half a month ago, called Contour Airlines. And they had $50 one-way flights to Charlotte.
It's like,
and
how can you miss that opportunity?
So I booked one. Like I literally called you up. I think I was in the middle of a coffee shop. You probably hear all the noise.
Yeah.
And I just like dialed it in. I bought the ticket, and here we are. It's my spring break too. I'm in my last 5 weeks of college, and so, it's just awesome though to get to hang out with you, man, and get to do all this and see all this. And
we're making so much content in just the span of like a couple of days. It's crazy.
It's literally a content weekend. That's what I put on my Instagram too.
Yep.
If you guys want to follow me, it's RBRADY Jordan, RBRADY Jordan. And he is Zach.
Zach.visuals is my main like photography type climbing skyscraper stuff. And at Zach.exp is my real estate and podcast page.
Yeah, and definitely. I said it earlier, slightly like joking tone, but no, I'm serious. If you do need to buy a house, highly recommend checking in with him. He knows what he's doing. He's really diligent with it, and he's very good at what he does.
Oh, yeah.
And that's Zach with CH, right?
Yes.
Just to provide that.
CH.
So it's ZACH.visuals and ZACH.exp.
Yep. That's
awesome. He's got a spam account, too, but I don't think he wants me to plug that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so, kind of getting back on track to what we were talking about with making a living with it.
Sure.
What's the biggest challenge you faced with making that full time?
The biggest challenge is, and I feel like this is the case for a lot of freelancers, and that's consistency. Because it is, going out and shooting is not that hard, right? But going out and shooting consistently and getting those clients can be a little challenging for some people, especially in highly saturated markets, and especially with, a lot of the paying gigs and stuff, because like Samantha who's Joe Schmo that's getting married, they don't care that I climb skyscrapers. Like, sure, it's cool, but they're getting married, and that's what they need to focus on,
Unless it's on top of a skyscraper.
Unless they're getting married on top of a skyscraper, right? But like they have every inclination to just go with somebody who only shoots weddings, right? So, like I said, it's like the whole skyscraper thing can best be tied into brands and people that I could incorporate that with. So it's kind of like harder to get normal, quote unquote, normal shoots. But I have been able to do that. It just has been a bit of a challenge. Like you have to do more reaching out. You have to do other work other than just skyscraper stuff. You have to do like normal shoots, and you have to build a portfolio doing that. And I did that. And I'm good now. I actually landed one of my biggest clients in December, which is Credit Karma. You check your credit score on creditkarma.com. And I was in charge of their videography for their internal Christmas party. And they rented out the entire through like 3-4 stories of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. It was a huge event. They hired an event like company that just puts on massive events. They had catering staff, full wait staff on every floor. They had multiple like stations for everything. They flew in photographers from San Francisco, an entire company of photographers that set up booths, and they would take the pictures, and then it would immediately it would be connected to a computer, and then they would print them out all in the span of like 2 minutes.
Wow.
They would just take your picture, It would like high quality Canon like photo printer or whatever, just print it out and then give it to the people. And they had 3 of those booths set up. They had one on each floor, and it was just massive event. Like all of their corporate came. It was crazy. And then their executive event coordinator just got back with me and wants me to shoot another event. So that's super sick.
How did you land Credit Karma as a client?
So that's an interesting story. I have a friend of mine who works in the audiovisual industry. He works a lot for NASCAR, concerts, stuff like that, doing AV stuff. He somehow overheard someone who like works at Credit Karma or something talking about it, about how they they're doing a huge Christmas party soon. They're looking for a videographer still, and he like jumped in and he's like, "Hey, I know a guy," and gave him my details. Some lady reached out to pretty much vet me first and like look over portfolio and stuff, and then
check your credit score.
Check my credit score, all that good stuff.
Yeah. And
then another dude reached out who was kind of coordinating the event itself with that company, and he was kind of the liaison. And then once I actually got there was when I met the executive event coordinator and kind of talked with her a little bit. But that was super sick.
That's awesome. And kind of talking about getting clients, because that's something that a lot of people struggle with. There are a lot of local kind of like creatives that I work with to help them build a business. And that's one of the number one questions I've gotten individually. And it's something that even I'm still figuring out. Like
right.
you're never truly done learning in this kind of field.
Oh, no.
And, with getting clients, like I have some advice on it, but I really want to hear what you have to say about it, because I feel like you've got a completely different experience with it than most people would in my market.
So there's no like one way that you can just focus on to get clients. It has to be a combination of a lot of different things. DM campaigns are great. Social media is such a tool for creators because it's like a mobile portfolio pretty much, and it's a platform that you can use for that. So DM campaigns, just building a presence on social media, emails, having a website helps out a lot to be able to show people, especially as you get more into the professional side of things. Another great benefit is just I've gotten so many clients from just word of mouth. Just make a name for yourself as like a good creator who cares about what they do, who's fun to be around, and you'll get so many referrals because everybody needs a photographer at some point. Everybody needs a videographer at some point. Somebody owns a local brewery, whatever the case is, and they're going to be like, "Oh yeah, I know a guy. Yeah, Brady. Oh yeah, man, he does all that stuff. Let me give you his info." And so that is super crucial of always be looking for that, everything. And something that I'm also learning to translate into real estate, and something that I learned as I got into real estate, is everybody can be a potential client, or if not, in the rare case that if not, they know a potential client. So if you can somehow work in what you do to almost every conversation you have with anybody or a stranger, and not in an obnoxious way, it's so easy to just slip in there and just be like, "Oh yeah, man, I remember, last week I was at this shoot, and that, that ties into what you said, because when we were shooting, we did this, blah, 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 blah." And now they're like, "Shoot?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, man, I'm a photographer. I do it full time, man." And then they're like, "Oh, that's sick. My freaking cousin Martha needs a photographer next Wednesday." And you just got yourself a gig.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it is that simple. So just be present, be out, put yourself out there, and you'll get clients. Definitely.
That's what you said really resonates with me in that, because that's, referrals are kind of, I've made a name for myself in the market that I'm in with referrals.
Right.
I've built the majority of my business that I've got now with referrals. And it's such a powerful tool. And, we talked about this yesterday a bit. And actually, the guest on your podcast, I was on his podcast yesterday, but someone else was too on a separate episode, talked about it too. But a huge place where I've gotten the majority of my clients and done the exact same thing you were talking about kind of like just working in what you do, has been coffee shops. Hence, cameras and caffeine. Caffeine has literally, I owe a large degree of success in my networking branches and everything that I've built out to coffee, because I always seek out a coffee shop no matter where I'm at. I've been to a coffee shop in every state that I've ever traveled to. And with that, I think coffee shops are so powerful because you can hang out there, and obviously if you're editing, your camera's going to be out.
Exactly. That's a huge thing. Or just
Yeah.
carry your camera around, you know?
One of my favorite photography professors at my university is like calls it bait. You put it out, you kind of like bring him in, because like, oh, what's that? And it's funny because that's literally what's happened to me before. I met a location scout from Los Angeles in the middle of Florence, Alabama, in a coffee shop.
Wow.
And the reason was because he saw my camera rig.
Yeah.
He just walked up to me. He's like, oh, what do you do? And I ended up keeping in contact with him. I still am to this day. I gave him my card, and I gave him a ton of locations.
Yeah.
That I think he ended up, or he's going to end up using some of those locations across the state of Alabama for
Sick.
a documentary. And it's remarkable. All of that came from, I had some bait at a table and a laptop, and I was editing photos at a coffee shop.
Yep.
And like, that's also where I get a ton of clients from, just talking about what I do. Like you said, working that into conversation.
Right.
I met a guy the other day who was, like he had a New Mexico hat on. If you're listening to this, hello, how are you? He had all that on, I just started talking about New Mexico and all that stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, I've got some family out there. And I went out there in 2019. I got a lot of really great photos, and I'm hoping to get clients out there at some point. He's like, clients, what do you do?
Exactly.
That's where you start.
Exactly.
And I gave him my card. I've heard from him, and I'm getting back to him and my inquiry pipeline and everything. And
Sick.
so, it's just stuff like that. And he just wants to like meet up, get coffee sometime. And like, that's how stuff starts with clients and people all over.
Yeah.
And like you said, even if like you're not trying to be a used car salesman at all.
No.
You're just literally being a friend to people, as many people as you can.
Uh-huh.
And if they know someone, like you said, who needs it, I've got this great friend that does this.
Yep.
Like that's just so great.
Oh yeah.
Kind of going off that. So, getting clients too consistently, I think, is something important that I think isn't covered as much with a lot of ways.
Right.
What's the way that you've kept your clients coming back?
Obviously the obvious one is do your best, make freaking quality content that their socks are gonna be blown off by, because if their socks are blown off, then they're much more likely to come back or to refer to you or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And remind them too, especially busier clients and stuff. You might have a bigger client and you do something for them and they're like, all right, cool, thank you. They pay your invoice, whatever. And then time goes by, time passes, you never hear from them again. And that's most likely just because they're so busy, they probably just forgot about you. And if you just send them a DM, send them an email and just be like, hey, I'm just checking in to see if, you might need any content coming up. I've got some availabilities in my schedule and I'd love to jump in and help out. And then that'll remind them of your existence kind of. And they'll be like, oh shoot, yeah, he did that awesome video for us a couple months ago. Dude, yeah, let's bring him in. And I've had that several times happen to me where I'll DM somebody and they're like, oh yeah, we actually just have a spring collection coming up and we'd love for you to shoot it. And that would not have happened if you didn't reach out. And something that's true of both the content world and the real estate world is follow up is so important. And that will happen. If you don't follow up, nothing else will come of it. So don't always count on people to remember you.
I mean, that's something I haven't even really considered. You learn something new every day, and you always learn something from working with people who want to do what you do as well.
Right.
Or do what you want to do as well, rather, in that order. Yeah. And, I think that's great. A great way to just maintain a relationship with a client. Yeah. Like, that's just such good advice.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Like, wow. The more that I get into real estate and the more that I learn, I've really found that content and real estate can be like perfectly married. And that's true of a lot of businesses, definitely. But you if you're in real estate or if you know anybody that's in real estate, you can either reach out to them, or if you yourself are in real estate, you can just do your own content in-house and save a crap ton of money, follow both of your passions at the same time, and it can just be freaking super beneficial.
And that's something we talked about a lot with the last guest on the show, Seth Crocker, was just like having a 9-to-5 that you love, and having a side hustle. And I mean, this kind of like photography was your 9-to-5 in a sense first. Mm-hmm. And so it's really interesting seeing you able to incorporate your passions for both into that career, and they both like complement each other so well. What would you say to someone looking to take their creative talents and apply them and sort of meld them
Right.
into another career, looking to do that, like real estate too, even.
I mean, the most important thing that you want to do first is no matter what it is you're in, keep an open mind, because pretty much, if you put enough thought into something, you can make it happen. So even if you don't think that your career or your job can be molded with content or with your passion for taking photos, taking video, whatever, there's probably some kind of a way. Like if you work at any kind of business that does any kind of marketing, then you can step in and help out with that. And even if your company already has somebody on staff that does marketing, just jump in and be like, hey, I'm learning to take pictures. I'm learning to do video. I would love to hang out with you one day and just, see what you do and help out a little bit in any way I can. And that can get you very valuable experience and maybe even, get you a little extra money or something down the road. You never know. But in most businesses, you can somehow tie content into it, like no matter what it is. You could have a restaurant, and do you know how many restaurants have like sick Instagrams with sick food photos, and they pay people to come in and take those pictures? But if you say you're a freaking cook at a restaurant, dude, reach out to your boss and be like, hey man, I take some pretty all right pictures. I'd love to come in and take some pictures of our food and have you guys promote it. And they could love it and be like, you know what, we're just gonna move you from the kitchen and hire you on as marketing. You never know. You literally never know. And it never hurts to ask.
Definitely, yeah. And it helps you to build a portfolio too.
Exactly.
Because that's very important. Free work, is something that is definitely a part of the process with getting into paid work.
Yep.
You have to pay your dues in a sense, as a lot of people say. And so, starting off with something like that, just kind of experimenting and giving people a value. Now, obviously, you want to make sure that stops at a certain point when like you have expenses and
100%,
overhead.
100%.
But doing a couple free jobs and just trying stuff for fun, getting out of your comfort zone.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's such a good way to like have something to show to people you want to get paid for.
Yep. And another really great way early on is something that I did to kind of do some portfolio building is like check out the creatives in your market, because odds are there's a community of some kind. There's a creative community in pretty much every city. And in Charlotte, there was some. And Sony actually came out to Charlotte, and they had this meetup of like Sony meetup. Everybody was allowed to come. You didn't have to own a Sony. You could bring your own camera if you wanted to. But they brought like a truckload of Sony cameras and Sony lenses, and they just stacked them up. And you had to sign up. All that you had to give them your ID and all that stuff, but they would pretty much give you whatever Sony equipment that you wanted, let you free in this huge studio, and they had models that they had brought in, and you could take incredible pictures of like all these models and of all this stuff. They brought in like this old vintage car and this huge studio. It was freaking sick, and it was completely free. Wow. And I wouldn't have known about that unless I, started researching stuff like that. And I got so much free, awesome content from these professional models in a professional studio. So that, and also a lot of creative groups will do meetups, where everybody meets up. Sometimes they'll bring a couple models, or the photographers will take pictures of each other's cameras, whatever. And they'll walk around the city, and a lot of people will have a lot more experience, and they'll be able to tell you, hey, this is a sick location, or hey, you could go here, and you just get a lot of content, and you can use that as portfolio content.
And you learn so much from working with other people like that too.
Exactly. And if you have something during that meetup or during that walk around, or if you're meeting another creator and you're like, hey, I've got this setting on my camera that I don't really understand, this one right here. And they're like, oh yeah. And then they explain it to you, and surrounding yourself with people that it's going to help you grow, especially like veterans kind of. If you surround yourself with people that have been doing it for a while and you haven't been doing it for a while, they're going to build you up and you're going to grow exponentially.
Yeah. That's great. Kind of closing up everything with what we've talked about too. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who is looking to do a very unique type of photography, maybe they don't even know yet.
Yeah.
Set themselves apart in a niche and make a living with it. Just pursue a passion that they love. And even if they have zero experience,
sure.
Like let's say somebody is in a coffee shop and they have a point and shoot Panasonic Lumix camera.
Right.
With no detachable lens. What would you tell them?
First of all, do a crap ton of research. Find out what's going on in your market, because every city is different. Every market is different. Find out what everybody's doing, what all the other creatives are doing. Find something that either nobody is doing that you think that you could do best, or that very, very few people are doing. and just go for it. Just jump in, all in. And the number one like crucial thing is do not give up, because there will be times where it will be very hard. You will not be making content that you're happy with. You won't be making any money or very, very little money, and it will be very hard. But if you just are consistent with it and you just keep pounding it out, you'll get somewhere and you will succeed 100%.
Definitely. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Zach. If you want to find Zach on his social media, and reach out to Zach, because everybody I have on the show is pretty reachable in general. If you guys have questions or advice for me or them, feel free to interact on social media, send some questions, and shoot him a DM.
Sure.
His social media, like we listed earlier, is zach.visuals, ZACH.visuals. It's pretty easy to spell that latter half. And then his spam account, kidding. His real estate account is ZACH.EXP. And if you're looking to buy a house, please buy a house from him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or if you want to listen to another podcast on at Zach.exp, we do Evian and Chill, where we sit down, crack open a cold bottle of Evian, and talk about real estate, business, and climbing skyscrapers.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. Well, really, I came over here. I flew up.
Yeah.
So I guess thanks for having me in your studio.
Absolutely, man.
And so we got to shoot Monday morning in Raleigh, and then I fly back next week.
Yep.
So
awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you for watching Cameras and Caffeine. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider leaving a like down below to let me know. And if you want to support me and the content that I make in the future, you can buy me a coffee at my link down below in the description. This podcast is also available in audio format on both Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. We've got a brand new guest on every week, so if you want to hear more from me, definitely consider hitting that big red subscribe button and bell notification icon next to it so you can always be in the know when I upload new episodes and clips. And as always, see you in the next one.